Hello and welcome to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services 2017 Measures Under Consideration Pre-Rulemaking Open Forum discussion. The primary focus of today's meeting is to provide overviews and demonstrations of the JIRA system for Measures Under Consideration data collection. My name is Martin Alvarado of Battelle, and along with Vince Brown, I will be moderating today's webinar. Now to review some housekeeping items, all participants are muted and will remain muted. At any time during this session, you can type questions using the webinar's text format question and answer feature. You can see this feature in the lower right of your screen. Type your questions and click send. Please make sure to ask your questions only through the Q&A feature and not through the chat option. As time permits, we will read questions aloud for presenters to answer. Questions that are of general interest but are not answered during the call may be added to the pre-rulemaking frequently asked questions document available on the pre-rulemaking website after today's webinar. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the CMS pre-rulemaking website in an on-demand video format for later viewing. The host will send all participants a link to the recording as soon as it is available. I am pleased to introduce Michelle Jeppe of CMS, who will host the remainder of today's webinar.
Thank you, Martin. I'm extremely honored to be here sharing information with you about this important topic, pre-rulemaking. Again, my name is Michelle Jeppe, and I am the agency lead for pre-rulemaking, which is a process that's been around since 2011. We'd like to thank you for joining today's Measures Under Consideration Open Forum. Our goal is not to be repetitive with the material that we are covering today, so hopefully you'll find the information to be new and informative. Today's webinar is the fourth and final in our series of 4 to kick off the 2017-18 pre-rulemaking season. All right, so this is a list of the topics that we're going to be covering today. And I just want to make an announcement. The presenter for the legislative impacts has changed. We are joined by my CMS and Battelle colleagues. Regina Chell is going to be reviewing the legislative impacts for us today. And now with that, let's move right quickly into the guidelines for proposing a measure and the important dates relevant to publishing the 2017 Measures Under Consideration list. All right, so for the caveats, by program, a measure only has to go on the list once to be considered for rulemaking. If a measure has been on the list before but is now being considered for a different program, it should be added back to the list. And finally, if a measure has a substantive change, it should also be added back to the list. If you could move to the next slide, please. All right, so after measure development and testing concludes, CMS's pre-rulemaking process gets underway with the submission and internal review of measures using JIRA. JIRA is an issue tracking system that's a web-based interface that enables users with the proper credentials to submit measure specifications along with some other pertinent data to CMS beginning each January. For the second year now, CMS has opened JIRA in January to begin the collection process for candidate measure submissions sooner. Earlier Measures Under Consideration seasons didn't start the process until early May, so now developers have an extra 3 months to make their JIRA measure submissions. So what happens between January 31st and May 1st that's not depicted here? CMS is planning and preparing for the official Measures Under Consideration season kickoff that happens in early May. During this time, I host a series of educational and outreach webinars, with today's meeting again being the fourth in the series of 4. Earlier this week, I hosted CMS's Measurement Needs and Priority session, which was recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared when it becomes available, so no worries if you missed it. So to point out, the first 3 boxes on this slide pertain to JIRA system dates. To note, CMS will close JIRA on Friday, June 30th, prohibiting anyone from submitting new candidate measures after this date. So the closing of JIRA in late June signals the start of the federal clearance process, which relates to the last 3 boxes on this slide. After JIRA closes on June 30th, the measure and program leads begin the tasks of reviewing, accepting, and/or rejecting each and every submitted measure by program. The measures that make the cut essentially are the accepted measures, and these become the annual draft Measures Under Consideration list, also known as the clearance document. The clearance document is created on July 21st, but before the list officially goes into formal clearance on August 21st, it is previewed by all involved federal agency representatives at the August 3rd stakeholder meeting with the purpose of gaining consensus before clearance. For those of you that are not familiar with the federal clearance process as it relates to the measures under consideration list, basically the list is shepherded across CMS, HHS, and O&B components and agencies, involving a lot of collaboration, cooperation, and communication at varying degrees and levels, and a relatively short amount of time to enable the publishing of the list by December 1st. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to our next presenter, the Deputy Director of the Division of Electronic and Clinician Quality, Regina Chell. Take it away, Regina.
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining the call today. The Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act requires CMS to submit new measures to an applicable specialty-appropriate peer-reviewed journal before they're included in the final annual list of quality measures. The information should include, but is not limited to, the method for developing and selecting the measures, including clinical and other supporting data. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits to the peer review requirement are submitting measures to a peer-reviewed journal. For publication does provide transparency. It's also another way to make eligible clinicians aware of the types of quality measures that can be reported. And next slide, please. So in order to collect the necessary information in a standardized way, CMS does require measure owners to complete a peer review template. You'll see included in this slide is a blank template that we're going to open up now to talk about a little bit. And there is also a completed example that you can reference for your own convenience. You'll also be able to find these documents on the CMS pre-rulemaking website if you go to the bottom and click on additional resources. So if we take a minute to look at this blank template, you'll see that there's very clear guidance of what needs to be submitted to CMS. So once you populate the initial measure information, the title, domain, and other information requested at the top, there's then 5 categories that need to be completed. It is critical that you complete everything on the template, so I would encourage folks to reference the sample template that's included here, because your submission will not be accepted if this document is not complete. So submitters should attach this template to the measure submission in JIRA for the 2017 MUC list. And please note that one form should be completed for each measure. Next slide, please. So there may be a few changes as we learn how to improve this process going forward, but again, this will be the standard process for collecting the information for this requirement. I'd also like to note that CMS may have additional questions regarding the information that you provide, so it's helpful if you're sure to include an email and phone number so that we can easily contact you with any additional follow-up questions. And now I'd like to turn it over to Vince Brown.
Hi, this is Vince Brown from Battelle. Thank you, Regina. I did want to point out, if you received the day before reminder for today's meeting, it should have had in it an attached PDF file, and at the back of that PDF are page displays of the blank MIPS template as well as the completed example template. And as Regina pointed out, those are also both available. The blank template is in Word format, so you can download it for every MIPS measure that you wish to submit and fill in that template for each measure and attach it right in JIRA. I'll demonstrate that here in just a moment. We do want to, for the benefit of any of you who were not on the previous calls, go over what changes are new for 2017 in JIRA, and then go through a demonstration of some new features that were not covered on the previous open forums or kickoff calls. Just to talk through these slides for one moment, again, only for the MIPS program, if you're submitting a candidate measure for MIPS, you'll find a new feature at the bottom of the Create box this year that asks you to click Yes once you have uploaded or attached the completed MIPS peer-reviewed journal article form, as Regina just described. This is mostly to serve as a reminder for yourself because it's a fairly new requirement, and a number of submitters in 2016 were surprised by this. So we want to make sure everyone possible that's working in the MIPS area is aware of it. Also, there is a new field this year. It's an optional field right next to the usual required state of development. The question of testing frequently comes up as CMS is reviewing these candidate measures as far as which measures to be accepted or rejected. Has it been through testing? Is there adequate documentation of what form that testing took? So the new box this year, which I will demonstrate, asks for state of development details. And this is a free text box where you are asked to describe where your measure is in the development cycle. For example, you're asked to describe the kind of testing that has taken place or what testing is planned and when. For example, alpha testing or beta testing for your particular candidate measure. One other tweak that we made for 2017 in the field Evidence of Performance Gap, you are asked for information on the current rate of performance and any variability within this rate. It's almost a statistical type of question, as well as information on the testing data set relevant to the evidence of the performance gap. Here again, this question is meant to document that your candidate measure is not topped out and that there is in fact a performance gap to be measured. Again, a very mechanical point, but just from the user point of view, if you have a multi-select drop-down in JIRA, the screen guidance now says that you can hold down the control key. It allows you to select non-consecutive items from a drop-down list if multi-select is that field type. If you'd go to the next slide, please. As we did last year, users have an option to edit their own measures up until May 1st. So just basically for the next couple weeks here. You are welcome to, once you've submitted your measure, you're welcome to go back in and edit that measure. You can still submit new measures at any time between now and June 30th, as Michelle indicated. The May 1st deadline is just for the self-editing. Again, to reiterate, June 30th is the deadline for adding a new measure. And then at any time, if you want to change your measure, you're welcome to use the Modify Candidate Measure issue type in JIRA, which I will demonstrate. And the screen shows a portion of that box where you click Yes once you've finished editing. That's a signal to CMS that your measure, that you're done editing it and that it's ready to move ahead in the CMS workflow. Next, please. So the main focus of our demonstration today will be to show the issue types besides submit candidate measure. You can also provide feedback or ask a question if you want CMS to respond to your question. And you can, again, request a change to a measure that you or someone else has already submitted. These issue types are near the top of the Create Issue screen in JIRA. If you would, and I would just mention, as Martin said at the beginning, the demonstration today will be fairly brief. I want to allow plenty of time for questions that might come in, and please use the Q&A screen at the lower right of your WebEx interface to put questions in there, and then Martin and I will respond to those shortly. So Martin, if you would please, I'd like to share the screen. Can you switch the WebEx control, Martin? Okay, just changing over. It'll just take a moment here. You should be able to see the login. I just show this screen to remind everyone that the JIRA system that we use for data collection is a database with a web interface, and you need to get a JIRA account, sign up for a JIRA account on there if you've not already used JIRA before. Then once you have signed up for an account, the user guide for 2017, which is on the pre-rulemaking website, describes how to go about getting access to this particular JIRA project for the 2017 Measures Under Consideration project. So you have to go through both the ONC JIRA account and then obtain a special access through CMS to get access to this project. Once you've logged in with the credentials that you receive, it remembers you, and so you don't need to retype your password every time. So I'll just log in. And again, because I've been in the system and use it every day, it takes me right to the project for 2017. The first time that you use it, you'll want to go up here to the Projects menu in the top and search for View All Projects, and then look for 2017. Click on that link, excuse me, and it brings you in. I'm going to click this View All Issues and Filters, and you can see we have 99 records in the database. There are about 50 measures submitted thus far in 2017, and there are other records that JIRA creates, which is why the number is 99 here as far as the total. But these are actual records, so I'm going to be careful not to change anything today through the demonstration. To start, you would go up to the Create button. It's a yellow button at the top, and a new window pops up to create an issue. So I'll scroll quickly to the bottom and show you the place. Again, if you are submitting a MIPS measure, this place here, it says Attachment. This is where you would attach the file, your completed MIPS peer-reviewed journal article form. And then here's the button at the bottom that I described that said once you have submitted it, this is just a reminder to you. Click Yes after you've attached it. And that will show that you've already done that. Here is the new field we talked about. JIRA has always been interested in what state of development, be it early, field testing, or fully developed. But this year, the new field is called State of Development Details. And so here's the text box. And again, below each item is a small print screen guidance that you can use that describes the kinds of information CMS and the MAP work groups are looking for in this field. So that's intended to help you to populate these fields. And again, general advice, the more information you give CMS and the MAP, the better their decision will be regarding your measure. Scroll down a little bit and you'll see the evidence of performance gap. And here again, they say the screen guidance now says, please provide current rate of performance and standard deviation from that rate to demonstrate variability. That is new guidance for this year to help get better information on the performance gap. I'll cancel out of this screen and just open one quick measure to illustrate the self-editing feature. If you choose to edit your own measure, you open that measure like this and then go here to the top left is a button called Edit. If you click on that button, a similar window will pop up. It says Edit Issue at the top. And so then you can go through here again until May 1st and change any value that you've already entered. And again, when you get to the bottom, once you know that you're finished editing, if you click this Yes button under Finish Editing, I won't do it because this is a real measure, but if you click that Finished Editing equals Yes, then we at CMS and at my contractor facility will be watching for that, and we'll know, okay, this measure is ready to move through the workflow. It just helps us even it out so that everything doesn't come crunching in at the last minute. So that's very helpful if you can do that once you know you're finished editing the measure. Okay, I wanted to demonstrate real quickly the issue types that you have. So I went back up to the yellow Create button. And under Create, you confirm here that you're on the right project for 2017 because there are other projects in JIRA. You always want to make sure you're in the right project. And then under Issue Type, it defaults to Measure Submission. This is the one that you would use to create a new candidate measure record. But if you want to ask a question, when I click this, you'll notice the screen has changed. It's a much smaller box with fewer questions. You're asked to define your component or CMS program, a description of your question, and then the actual question here and who the contact information is, a primary and secondary contact. Then you click Create, and we will see that question and hopefully get you an answer. Feedback is similar. It's even shorter, though, because we use the feedback as a kind of lessons learned utility. If you just have a suggestion that you would like to make, you can drop it in the feedback if you don't necessarily request a reply from CMS. So that's what this is for. And then this third one, Modify Candidate Measure. What you need to do is this is for any measure that has already been created in 2017. And if you need to make a change to it, especially after May 1st, after the self-editing feature closes down, then you would go to this Modify Candidate Measure screen. And again, it's asking you for which CMS program that you're in, such as home health or long-term care. Summary, a brief description, the measure title there. If you know the measure ID, such as MUC 17- whatever number it might be, 138 is the one we were looking at, that would help. And then the change that you wish to make, and be as specific as possible. Sometimes people will enter the same record twice and they'll say we need to delete that one, we should only have entered it once. Other times they'll say we've received new information, we need to add this to the numerator or change the denominator, or we received new published evidence, we'd like to add the following 5 references to this record. This is the box where you would put that in. And again, who are you, the primary contact and the secondary contact? Those people may be different from the person who's actually submitting the change request. That's why we ask for those. Any field in JIRA on any of these screens, if it has a red asterisk beside the field label, that means it's a required field. And so before you click the Create button, you always want to make sure that those are filled out. If you change your mind, you can always hit the cancel and go back. So this concludes the demonstration period. I will turn it back. I'll stop sharing here. Oh, it asks me to make sure that I want to cancel. I'm going to stop sharing and pass the screen back to Martin. And we'll see if anyone has questions. You're welcome to type questions using the Q&A feature on the lower right of the webinar screen. Thank you.
Hi, Vince. We received a question. The question states, for the state of development, what do the options alpha and beta mean? What information is CMS looking for in this section?
I need to turn that one over to Michelle, I think.
All right, I'm sorry, Martin. Could you read that again?
Sure. For the state of development, what do the options alpha and beta mean? What information is CMS looking for in this section?
Michelle, this is Maria. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're trying to ascertain here is the level of readiness of the measure for prime time, and we're referring to testing, alpha and beta testing.
And alpha and beta were just examples of the kinds of information. You know, you're asked what type of testing is planned, what type of testing has been done. In addition, you know, supply any results of that testing. So you're asked to provide the details on, to further back up the state of development that you're claiming for this measure.
Thank you, Mr. Maria. Okay, so there was another question that came in as well. Are there available risk adjustment plans for the use of quality measures in a QCDR? Thank you for that question. I did put an answer into the WebEx, so there's a reference there now to a CMS URL. So if you still have further questions, please send us an email. Send me an email, which is, my email address is at the back of the slide deck. And then there was also another question that came in relative to, I believe it was similar to the same topic, and let me pause for a moment while I put my hands on that. Okay, the question was, is there a list of quality measures that have risk adjustments, specifically those that have already been approved for the 2017 reporting? Basically, the finalized measures for each program is identified in the rule associated with that said program. To note, just because a measure has gone through the pre-rulemaking process does not necessarily mean it's going to be selected for that particular program. So, in essence, pre-rulemaking and rulemaking are completely separate and unique processes. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to, again, shoot us an email.
Michelle, this is Vince. I wanted to loop back real quickly on the risk adjustment question. I'm guessing that this is pertaining to the MIPS peer review journal article form, and section 3 asks about, is the measure risk adjusted and are there benchmarks? And I just wanted to point out, one of the lessons we picked up in 2016 was that it's very helpful to the MIPS and the others who are reviewing these forms if you provide detail on those. The question is it risk adjusted and are there benchmarks? You could answer that yes or no, but MIPS folks are really looking for the detail there. What are the benchmarks? Describe the risk adjustment that has been applied if applicable. So thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, and then there was another question related to the peer review journal article requirement. And that question was, and thank you for submitting it, could you provide some example names of prior peer review journals that potential measures have been published in? So I'm going to pass it over to Regina Chell to respond to that question. Regina,
sure.
Are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
We sure can, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So yes, for last year, CMS submitted the peer review journal articles to the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA. And just to remind folks that the legislative mandate is to submit the articles to the journal, but there's not a mandate that the articles get published.
This is Vince. To Regina's answer, I would just add that the example completed template lists at the very bottom the American Heart Association journals as another example.
Thanks, Vince and Regina. Okay, so there was another question that came in, great question. It goes as follows. If a measure is adopted, will the developer be notified personally, or does the developer need to go to the CMS website? When will this announcement occur for approved measures? And again, I think that answer would be relative to if the measure goes through rulemaking in that particular program. Again, pre-rulemaking, rulemaking, two totally different processes. Hopefully that answers your question. If not,
I think, this is Maria, so I think what you're saying, Michelle, is that whether it's adopted in the program is going to depend on rulemaking, whether it is being suggested for the pre-rulemaking process and available to go through the commenting and pre-rulemaking review process. The answer is a little bit different. But that doesn't, again, just to emphasize, being in the pre-rulemaking process does not make the measure be adopted in the program. That's subject to rulemaking and public comment.
Correct, and that's right. Thank you for elaborating on that. So in other words, if the measure ends up on the measure under consideration list, it's published there, the next step in that process would be the measure being published in an NPRM, the notice, and Maria helped me out with what that acronym actually stands for. Thank you. If it's published in the NPRM, and then the Federal Register and so forth. So that would be one way that the developer would be notified if their measure is moving forward.
I would add, too, this is Vince, on the question of adopted. If that questioner really meant if the measure is published on the measures under consideration list, if that's the adoption that was being referenced there, I mean, that list is posted on the CMS and the National Quality Forum websites around December 1st each year. And I would also add, if you are the submitter of the measure in JIRA, you should receive auto notifications anytime anyone touches or changes or comments on your measure. And so that would be a good place to watch, just kind of track your measure in JIRA to see what decisions are made as it goes through the clearance and pre-publication steps. The question was, will the developer be notified? I'm not sure if the developer is different from the person who submitted in JIRA. I'm not sure what notification is other than the publication of the MUC list as far as pre-rulemaking is concerned.
Good points. Thank you, Vince and Maria.
Here's a question that came in. Are the federal-only stakeholder meetings closed, or can measure developers listen to the meetings in a listen-only mode?
Okay, thank you for that question. Great question. That meeting is closed to the public. That meeting takes place with the federal stakeholders only, and the purpose is for our federal stakeholders to review the document before it enters into clearance. We are not able to publish the measures under consideration list until it completes clearance.
Michelle, I believe, this is Vince, I believe the MAP workgroup meetings are open to the public. Those happen in December, January, February, right?
That's correct. So once the list is published, and again, statutorily, the measures under consideration list must be published each year annually by December 1st. If your measure is included on the list, then you'll of course see it there. And basically, once the list is published and the measure is put forward, then it would be reviewed by the Measures Application Partnership in the December-January timeframe. All right, are there any other questions? I see one that came in. Will the open forum recordings be available on the website? Yes, the series of 4 meetings, the educational and outreach series of 4, all 4 of these meetings were being recorded, and they will be put up on the pre-rulemaking website. Yes, thank you for that question. All right, do we have any others? Well, I guess at this point, while we are waiting, if we could move to the next steps slide, Martin. All right, so the first 2 bullets here are relative to JIRA dates. The first date, as Vince and I had mentioned earlier in our presentation, refers to May 1st, and that date represents the date that folks that enter measures into JIRA can edit their own measures. So through May 1st, feel free to edit your submissions. After that date, you would need to enter a modified candidate request within JIRA. The second date there refers to the closing of the 2017 project in JIRA. So after June 30th, further candidate measures will not be accepted for this particular season, and you would need to hold those until 2018 submissions open, which would be at the beginning of January 2018. And then we have the federal-only stakeholder meeting that takes place again on August 3rd, which is only open to our federal stakeholders to preview the list as previously discussed. And then if folks have additional questions or would like to look at the user guide for JIRA or reference the measures under consideration timeline, please feel free to visit the pre-rulemaking website, which the link is included in this slide. It has a whole host of resources out there and available to you. And of course, if you can't find information on the website, feel free to shoot me an email, which is located at the end of the slide deck. So at this point,
Michelle, here's one more question that just came in,
Sure.
if I might.
Mm-hmm.
The questioner asks, these measures are for 2018, and this is Vince, and my response would be the measures under consideration list must be published by December 1st each year, but because of the time required for the MAP groups to consider and evaluate and make their recommendations, the MAP report for that 2017 measures under consideration list is dated early 2018. That's why a lot of our language will refer to the 17-18 pre-rulemaking cycle. So it can be a little confusing because we're referring to the list, December list, from the prior year, or this current year, if you will, but the MAP recommendations issues or is published in the early winter of the following year. I don't know if Michelle or Maria wants to describe any more about that.
That's right. You hit the nail on the head, Vince. So, yes, we are collecting measures now that will be reviewed by the Measures Application Partnership in the December-January timeframe. The reports will come out early 2018 in terms of whether or not a measure would be included in a rule. That would be specific upon the particular program and whether or not they decide to adopt a measure for rulemaking, which is a completely separate process. And those calendars vary by program. And then there was another question that just came in too, when will this recording be available to re-listen? My goal is to get these recordings put up on the CMS website as soon as possible. I know folks are eagerly wanting to get their measure submissions in there, and I know that these sessions are very helpful in doing so. So a link will be sent out when those recordings become available, so you're not having to consistently recheck the website. So look forward to more information. Stay tuned. All right, so I'm not seeing any additional questions at this point in the WebEx. So I just want to thank the presenters for today for taking their time and attention to present the materials relative to pre-rulemaking. And I want to thank all of our participants for dialing in and for all the great questions. Good discussion. Thanks everyone for joining, and that concludes our open forum for today.